Can't get small. Okay. Okay, welcome everybody. And we're on. Oops, sorry about that. We're on the bottom of Lamed what? Lamed. What was that? I got the wrong page. Where are we? We're on the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. Really, we're up to the last line. But just to back up a little bit, what we're talking about. There was a kasha we had a couple of pages ago. We had a question that Amish says that there's a knas, even if there would be chayv krisis, even if someone had relations with someone, a relation that is chayv chorus, and there's malchus, says the Mishnah in Malchus, still there's going to be knas. That was Mor's kasha in lokum mishalem. How could it be that he gets both punishments, both of the penalty, the monetary penalty, and also the lashes, the malchus? And now we had so far two terusim. One teretz was a case where there's not going to be, it's only malchus in the case where there's no penalty, or there's no. The penalty will be in the case where there's no malchus. Those are the two terusim so far. The Shlokish came with a third teretz, and even though you're right that the Rabbanan, they hold you can't get both punishments, not in lokum mishalim, but the Rameir, don't forget the Rameir holds lokum mishalim, that he doesn't hold this whole principle that it's not possible to get both punishments. He gets both punishments. So the Mishnah in kesuvos is true that there's a knas, and the Mishnah in malchus is true that there's malchus, and there's no contradiction. He gets both. They want a problem because our Mishnah continues to say that if he would have had relations with a woman who is even chayiv Mrs. Bezdin, even capital punishment, he's pater because of kamle b'drabimine, that when someone gets killed, it's not mesa mishalim. That if someone gets killed, so kamle b'drabimine only gets killed, then he doesn't get the monetary punishment. And Rameir doesn't hold of that either. And there were things the Rameir doesn't hold of it because there's a brisa which we'll be discussing today very much. This is the brisa over here in pink that we'll be discussing. It says if somebody stole and slaughtered on Shabbos, there's a lot of somebody steals and slaughters an animal, a cow, a sheep, so he has to pay 4 or 5 times more, four times more for a how does it go? Right, four for the sheep and 5 for the cow. So here it says that if he did it on Shabbos, he stole and he slaughtered on Shabbos. So slaughtering on Shabbos is a capital punishment. So we would think that goes kamle b'drabimine, which used to say chacham potrim, that in the case where he would have stolen and slaughtered on Shabbos, he'd be potter because for the payment because kamle b'drabimine. But the Rameir says chayiv. That's what the Gemara thinks. The Rameir doesn't hold the whole principle called kamle b'drabimine. He doesn't hold that even if it would be a chayiv Mrs. Bezdin, even if it would be a capital punishment, also he should have to pay. So if so, you can't say that our Mishnah holds like Rameir because our Mishnah says bito. The Mishnah later on is going to say that if he had a relation with his daughter, which is chayiv Mrs. Bezdin, that he would be potter. So how could you reconcile our Mishnah with Rav Meir? So yesterday, we had this more yesterday already. Rav Yochanan said, Rav Meir does get the principle of kamle b'drabimine. He also holds it to be potter if he incurred capital punishment at the same time as the monetary punishment. But the case that if somebody stole and slaughtered Avodah Zarah would be in a case where somebody else slaughtered it. It means he stole it and he stole it, but then he gave it to the shochet. He gave it to the slaughterer to slaughter. He didn't slaughter it, and that's why he's not the one who slaughtered is chayv capital punishment for doing it on Shabbos, and he's not. That's why he'd be chayv to pay. There was a problem with that. That usually we say in shlichut barbera that he shouldn't be chayv for the monetary payment either because you only have to pay the geneva that you stole, but you don't have to pay 4 or 5 times more because I told somebody else to do it. And usually we say that you don't have a messenger, an emissary, to be able to do an avera. If you tell somebody to do an avera, he's not allowed to listen to you, and he would be responsible, not you. And over here, you want to say that the case is somebody else slaughtered it, and the one who stole it is going to be the one who's high 4 or 5 times. And the Gemara brought a couple of psukim, either because it says similar to mechira, just like mechira also involves the buyer. Also, somebody else is involved in this transaction. So too, even if you give someone else the slaughter, or because of the word o, or because of the word tachas. And the Gemara says that here's an exception to the rule, and you are chayiv even if somebody else carried out the slaughtering. The Gemara has a side problem that how could it be that if you would do it, you'd be potter and shliach does it as chayiv? And the Gemara answered because he's also you're really chayiv, just that there's a kamle b'drabimine, and that's why it's a technicality that you're potter. That's as far as we got yesterday, and now we're continuing one line up from the bottom. So let's finish saying that case over there that you're chayiv. The case of Meir says, just to get the case, this case in the pink, which of Meir says you're chayiv. The Gemara says it's talking about that somebody else slaughtered it. You stole it and slaughtered it on Shabbos. What does it mean? If you slaughtered it to be potter, even according to Meir, because kamle b'drabimine, because you incurred the capital punishment. The case over here is that you gave it to somebody else to slaughter. That's the reason why you're chayiv, because you didn't incur a capital punishment because you didn't slaughter it, somebody else slaughtered it. Now the question is, if that's a nice pshat, very nice, but the Chachamim Potrin says under the Brisa that the Chachamim do say it's pater. We thought till now because come but now you're saying that it's not true. The case is that somebody you didn't slaughter it, so why should the Chachamim say pater? That's what the Gemara has to explain now, and that's the bottom line. Even my time either Rabban the Patri. Why should Rabban argue and say that he's pater? Why should he be pater? He didn't incur upon himself a capital punishment, so why should they not agree that he's chayav to pay 4 or 5 times? The Gemara answers, Man Chachamim, Rabbi Shimon so the Gemara brings in a new concept which we didn't hear about, and not recently. Where does it say on the side here? We had it. No, it doesn't say. We didn't have it yet. So far, it says in the Shas we didn't have it. So it says that the Torah says that he shechted it, he slaughtered it. So there's a machlokes if slaughtering means you're killing it, or slaughtering means that slaughtering it in a way that it's possible to eat. It's only called slaughtering if you made it edible by your slaughtering. Like we know, but usually when you slaughter an animal, you're allowed to eat it. What if you slaughtered it in a way that you're not allowed to eat it? You did it in a non-kosher way, you didn't slaughter it in a kosher way. So when the Torah says that if somebody steals and slaughters it, he has to pay 4 or 5 times. That's slaughtering it. Doesn't mean in a kosher way and even in a non-kosher way. So that's a machlokas. Reb Shimon says shchita she'eina ru'ya lo shma shchita. If it's not a proper shchita, so then it's not considered a shchita. It's not considered slaughtering. And this halacha, he would say that you're not chayiv. The case of paying 4 or 5 times more is only if you did a kosher slaughtering. And here the Gemara is going to say to do it on Shabbos, or if you slaughtered it on Shabbos, or you slaughtered it Avodah Zarah, the food is not kosher to eat. You're not allowed to eat that food. That's going to be the Gemara subject now. And if it's not kosher to eat, then that's the reason why you're not chayiv. Rav Meir holds chayiv because he says it's not a case of coming with Rabbi. So Rav Meir says if somebody else slaughtered it, so you should be chayiv. But the Rabbanans, even if he did it on Shabbos, if he did it on Shabbos or Avodah Zarah, it doesn't make a difference because that's considered slaughter. But the Rabbanan say, like Reb Shimon, that if it's not edible as a result of the slaughtering, so it's not considered a slaughtering. And therefore, the case we have slaughtered it on Shabbos, or the shochet slaughtered it on Shabbos or Zarah, so it's not edible. But the Gemara says he doesn't understand. The Gemara thinks at this point that if someone shechted on Shabbos, he should be allowed to eat it, even though he did an Avera. He slaughtered on Shabbos, did a terrible Avera, it's Chayv Misa, but the animal that he shechted is kosher. The shechta avodah zarah, that the Gemara knows. When he shechta avodah zarah, the meat becomes asa. If someone slaughtered an animal as they sacrificed avodah zarah, the animal becomes asa to eat. And also Sha'anisko said on the Bryce something about a Sha'anisko, which means a ox which had killed and is chayiv to be killed. We're going to stone the animal because it killed somebody. So that also is usher to eat. The food, the meat is usher to eat. And therefore, if someone slaughtered it, it doesn't help. It's not considered shchita ruya. Shchita Shabbos, shchita ruya. The Gemara thinks that if you slaughtered on Shabbos, or a Jew slaughtered on Shabbos, the Gemara thinks that the meat is a mutter to eat. If somebody slaughtered on Shabbos Yom Kippur, even though he's chayiv misa, either on Shabbos chayiv on Yom Kippur chayiv kares, but the shchita is still kosher. So if it's kosher, so then it's a shchita ruya. It's considered an appropriate shchita. So why should the Rabbanan say that he's pater for doing this? He's pater from Dalet Vei because it's not edible. It is edible. The Gemara says there is an opinion that argues that if someone shechted on Shabbos, the meat is also to eat. The Tanya we learned in a Bryce that the Gemara is going to bring 3 opinions. Rav Meir, Rav Yehuda, Rav Yochanan Sandler, and Rav Yochanan Sandler is going to say that nobody's allowed to eat it. Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda might talk about there is some restrictions of who and when is he allowed to eat it, but Rav Yochanan Sandler is the only one that says that no one's allowed to eat it at all. According to the other opinions, even though it might be a restriction on who's allowed to eat it, but it still did permit the meat for somebody. But according to Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, no one's allowed to eat it. So that will be the pshat that according to him is a shchita she'eina ruya. Well, this is going into Shabbos a little bit. The Tanya, I'm a vashal b'Shabbos b'shogeg yochel b'meizel lo yochel divrei Meir. If somebody cooked on Shabbos, cooking is an example of one of the 39 malachas. Whatever he did, he cooked, he slaughtered, whatever he did. So if someone did malacha on Shabbos, if he did it unintentionally, he's allowed to eat it. Even he is allowed to eat it even on Shabbos. I'm going to say, I think Rashi's pshat maybe Taisus argues, but the simple words that if he did it unintentionally, he forgot that it's Shabbos, he forgot that you're not allowed to do it. So then even he's allowed to eat it on Shabbos also. Even on Shabbos. Immediately he's allowed to eat it. But if he did it intentionally, Shabbos intentionally, then he's not allowed to eat it. Maybe nobody's allowed to eat it. He's not, we'll talk about him. He's not allowed to eat it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, b'shogeg yochal l'motzai Shabbos, that he differentiates that even about the time. Rabbi Meir doesn't say a difference on the time. He just says you may eat it, you might not eat it. Rabbi Yehuda says on Shabbos alone, even if he did it unintentionally, he's not allowed to eat it. For that day, he shechted on Shabbos, so we tell him for the rest of the day, you're not allowed to eat it. If he did it unintentionally, Motzei Shabbos, you'd be allowed to eat it. But if you did it intentionally, then you're never allowed to eat it. The person who did it. But according to Rabbeinu Yehuda, it seems that somebody else would be allowed to eat it. That even though the person himself maybe he's not allowed to eat it on Shabbos, so he's not allowed to eat it even Motzei Shabbos if he did it b'mezid, but somebody else would be allowed to eat it. So according to them, it's called shchita ruya. According to them, the shchita did accomplish that it made it permissible to eat. There is the person who did it; he's not allowed to eat it, or he's not allowed to eat it temporarily. But someone's allowed to eat it, so that's called shchita ruya. The shchita accomplished that it's permissible to eat. But Rabbi Yochanan Sandler Omer, that's what we're looking for. He's the most machmir. He says that even if he did it unintentionally, no one's allowed to eat it on Shabbos. Till now, he just said that the person himself who did it maybe he's not allowed to eat it on Shabbos. But he says that b'shogeg it's only mutter Motzei Shabbos only for other people. V'lo, he's not allowed to eat it even Motzei Shabbos. The person.
How does that reflect on the messenger? The messenger stole it. He gave it to be shipped. And if it's not done in a kush way, does that reflect on the messenger?
We're talking about if the slaughtering was not done in a way that it makes it edible, so then this is not the case that the Torah says you have to pay 4 or 5 times. When does the Torah say to pay 4 or 5 times? If it was slaughtered correctly. It's true, you have to have that. He shouldn't have incurred upon himself a death penalty. So he didn't. He gave it to somebody else. But even the messenger who did it, so did he make a kosher shchita? Did he make a slaughtering which is going to make it edible? If no one's allowed to eat it because he did it on Shabbos, even if he's not chai, even if nothing to do with the kamlei b'drabi minei, nothing to do with the fact that he incurred a death penalty. Are you allowed to eat it? Are you allowed to eat the food that he slaughtered? So according to a mayor, someone's allowed to eat it. Even if he did it b'mezid, someone else is allowed to eat it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, also someone will be allowed to eat it. Motzei Shabbos, someone will be allowed to eat it. According to Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, if you did it b'mezid, no one's allowed to eat it. So it's not considered a shchita ruya. B'shogeg, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says, if it was b'shogeg, then the person. This is talking about a regular case, nothing about stealing. Someone did malach on Shabbos. He did some kind of an isser on Shabbos. Is a lot of benefit from it. So Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says, if it was done unintentionally, so then the person himself does not a lot of benefit from it, but other people can benefit from it on Motzei Shabbos. If he did it intentionally, then no one's a lot of benefit from it. If someone is machal Shabbos intentionally, no one's allowed to benefit from whatever he produced, ever. Nobody, ever. So that's what the Gemara is trying to find, that we found an opinion that says that it's called a shchita she'eina ruya. If somebody would have slaughtered on Shabbos, it's not beneficial, it's not edible. So therefore, the reason why the Rabbanan say that he's pater, again, somebody stole and he gave it to somebody else to slaughter, he gave it to a messenger to slaughter it on Shabbos. So the reason why the Rabbanan say it's pater is because the slaughtering did not make it edible for anybody. Like a Yochanan Sandler. The Gemara goes into a side point. If we want, we could put this in parentheses just to point out where does Rabbi Yochanan get it? Yochanan Sandler get it from? Where does Rabbi Yochanan Sandler get that? Did I go too far? Where is my timer? First line over here on the screen. My timer, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler. Where does he get it from? That if someone is machal Shabbos b'mezid, he's not. No one's never allowed to eat it. Then the way Priya said his drasha by the opened the doorway of the Nasi. What did he say? The pasuk says, "Ushmartem Shabbos ki kodesh hi lachem." That's the pasuk. You should guard Shabbos because it is holy. And the Gemara is a drash here to say that it's holy, just like korban is holy. Things are holy. No one's allowed to benefit from it. So also, somebody was machal Shabbos. Someone produced something on Shabbos. So you're not allowed to benefit from it.
You have to wait once it's Shabbat, the time it takes.
No, this is something else. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says that it doesn't help. If you did it b'mezid, I think you're talking about waiting at that's if a goy did malacha for you. If a goy did malacha for a Jew, he has to wait. Here we're talking about if a Jew did malacha by mistake or intentionally, if you're allowed to benefit from it ever. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says that if he did it intentionally, no one's ever allowed to benefit from it. Where does he get that from? Ki kodesh hi lachem, because Shabbos is holy. But the Gemara is dashing, not only Shabbos is holy. The whatever you produced on Shabbos, which you weren't allowed to, you did malacha on Shabbos, it's holy, not holy in the sense that it's holy, in the sense that no one's allowed to benefit from it. Just like a korban is usher to anybody to eat it, so you're not allowed to benefit from it. So too, if someone did ma'aser Shabbos, someone did malacha on Shabbos, so that product that he produced is usher forever to eat. You might think you're not allowed to even benefit from it. We're saying they're only not allowed to eat it, but it's not us. It doesn't become us to have benefit from it, only to eat. That the pasuk says that I'm only saying you're not allowed to eat it, but not that it's not yours at all. It is still considered yours. You can benefit from it, but you can't eat it. Yachal afilu b'shogeg, which we said that even Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says it's only as if it was b'mezid, not if it was b'shogeg. Tamad lo ma'am chalalem os yumas b'mezid amati l'chavalo b'shogeg. I'm only talking about if he did it intentionally, like it says right away that the person who's l'chal Shabbos, he should be put to death. That's of course only talking about if he did it intentionally. So this was a drasha we said. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says that if someone does malacha on Shabbos intentionally, the product is usher to eat for anybody ever. And that's what the Gemara says. It's called shchita she'eina ruya. The Gemara continues with this point. It's not so simple to take it literally. The way it sounds is a pasuk, it's a daraisa, but the Gemara says not so simple. There's a machlokas between these two Amaran, Ravach and Ravina. Chadam Amaisa Shabbos daraisa. One says what we just said. This whole drasha we said about Kodesh He. It's a daraisa. It's been a Torah. There's a Torah drasha, and something not fit from the produce that you made on Shabbos B'Isser on a deraisa level. Some say it's only Rabbanan, take the drash only as a asmachta. It's not in the Torah. Some adam with the deraisa kedamoran. So everything we said till now only makes sense if you hold that as the deraisa. So then it's called shchita she'eina ruya, that the shchita that you did on Shabbos doesn't permit you to eat it. So therefore, Rabbanan say that he's potter for ganav v'tabach b'Shabbos because it's not a good shchita. The shchita doesn't accomplish that you're allowed to eat it. But ma'adam with Rabbanan. First of all, wants to know how can he say it's Rabbanan? The pasuk says this drasha. We should hold it a drasha to say that it's kodesh. Amakra kodesh he kodesh vein masa kodesh. The Gemara wants to explain why he doesn't hold it a drasha because it doesn't say that the produce of Shabbos is kodesh. It says that Shabbos is kodesh. He kodesh. The Shabbos is holy, but not that the produce that you did on Shabbos is kodesh. And now the Gemara is asking that if so, you don't have an answer to our kasha. Well, the mandam of Rabbanan might have Rabbanan the patri. Back to the answer. Back to the kasha again. The beginning of the day, at the bottom of the page, what was our kasha? Might Rabbanan the patri. If the case is that somebody else shechted it and there's no issue about kamle b'drabamine, so how come the Rabbanan say that he's potter? Meir says he's potter because he's chayiv because it wasn't done by the same person who's chayiv misa. He gave a shliach to shecht it. So the shliach is the one who did the chiyuv of Shabbos that is chayiv misa, and the owner, the one who gave it, the one who stole it, he's the one who has to pay. That's called. It's not a kamle b'drabim in a case. So what the Gemara wanted to know what's the reason of the Rabbanan. The Gemara tried to say the pshat about the fact that it's not shchita she'eina ruya according to Baruch Nasandla, but the Gemara say not everybody holds like that. Some hold that even according to Baruch Nasandla, it's only Rabbanan, it's an asmachta. So if so. So where why should I want to say that he's potter? The Gemara says you're right. That enochanami that the Rabbanan say potter, they're not going in all three cases. If we scroll back to where the Rabbanan said potter, here was the case. It said three cases. It says someone stole and shechted on Shabbos, someone stole and shechted avodah zarah, and the shar nisko. Gun of shar nisko v'tavcho. So Rav Meir said in all these three cases is chayiv, the chacham potrin. So we took it chacham potrin on all three cases. But the Gemara says it could be not. It could be the only say potter on the second two cases over there, shchita she'eina ruya, that someone shechted avodah zarah is not edible, it becomes aser bana. Shar nisko is also aser bana. That's where they say that it's potter because it's shchita she'eina ruya. It's not an appropriate shchita. But in the first case, the gun of v'tavach Shabbos, they're not arguing on that. They agree. They're not saying the potter in the cases where it's not edible. But the first case, which is edible, and even according to Baruch Nasandla, the Gemara is saying, but the rice you're allowed to eat is only the Rabbanan. So there they wouldn't argue. They would also hold that as chayiv. The Gemara has a few side points now. Mamish, some side points that come up. Maybe make a parenthesis over here just to show that it's not the main subject. There was a question on tabach. Tabach, it says before that if somebody shechted for avodah zarah, so we said according to Meir is chayiv. Again, we're talking about somebody stole and shechted to avodah zarah on Shabbos, or he shechted he stole and shechted a shar nisko. So Meir said chayiv, and the Rabbanan said potter. So far we said the reason is because is it called a shchita ruya? Is shchita she'eina ruya shma shchita? The more zakasha according to Meir, if you shechted for avodah zarah, is that going to be chayiv tabech avodah zarah? Even the shachad report that it's alay either kikatavach lav the mori katavach. If someone shechs for avodah zarah, even one siman, we know that animal has two simanim, the esophagus and the trachea, and by shchita you have to shech both simanim or rove of each one of the simanim in order to be considered a shchita. But as far as coming asat avodah zarah, as soon as somebody shechted even one of the simanim, it already becomes asat avodah. The meat becomes asat. That's called the shechted avodah zarah, even one siman. So the Gemara is asking, what siman means one of those two pipes, the windpipe and the food pipe. if he shechted even one of them, it's already comes also to avodah zarah. So the Gemara is asking, so when he continued to shechting it, the second simon, so it's not his anymore. It's worthless already. After he shechted a little bit of the animal, one of the simanim, it already became asabana. So how could you say that he's chayiv for shechting the one that he stole from? He stole his animal and he shechted it. It isn't his animal anymore. It's already worthless. At the time that he shechted one simon, it already becomes avodah zarah. It becomes already also like up to avodah zarah. And the rest that he shechted is not considered his anymore. It shouldn't be worth anything. And therefore, he shouldn't be chayiv dollar v'hei. We're saying the reason why, according to Rabbi, the reason why it's chayiv is because it's still, because even if he holds chiddush and nevuya, that doesn't bother him, even though it's not edible, but it doesn't belong to him anymore. But the Gemara says, I'll give you an answer to say what this case is. That he said, I don't want to make shiri avodah zarah till the end of the shechita. It's true. Usually, if you're doing it to avodah zarah, even by the first simon already becomes asa. But if he says to finish, I don't want to serve avodah zarah only when the end of the shechita. So there, it doesn't become asa until then. Like a technical problem and a technical answer. If anybody wants the air conditioner, if it's more comfortable for anybody, please. The next case, as long as everybody's. Gemara is the kasha on the shor niskal. What do we say about the shor niskal also? If somebody's a shor niskal means an ox which is supposed to be stoned because it killed somebody or other things that happen with it, and then you have to stone it, and it's considered worthless. Not a lot of benefit from the meat. So the kasha is shor niskal lavdi deyu. It doesn't belong to anybody. It's worthless. How could you be chayiv dollar v'hei? How could you be chayiv? You only chayiv 4 or 5 times the value, but it's not worth anything. Even when you stole it, it wasn't worth anything. For this also, how does the word go? Lavdi deyu katavach. He's not slaughtering the animal of the one that he stole it from because it doesn't have any value. If something has no value, that means you don't own it. There's no value. Ownership means that you have some value out of it, but if it's worthless, you don't own anything.
That's a big condition. Let's say garbage in my house. I don't own it. Someone's like
Ownership only means if it has value. If it has no value, then it's not called ownership. Ownership has to have value.
why is that so question?
What does ownership
Before
mean?
I threw it out. I have
If it's valuable to you, so then it's
The
yours.
what?
If it doesn't have value, so then it's not. I think that's what. If you have something to do with it, if there's some value, if there's no value to it, so
might
then
as well different. I owned it. It got ruined.
ownership, it has to be if it's worth something still. But if it's worth nothing, so then there's no the whole
Well, had that-
concept called
had-
ownership. Ownership means that it's something, but if it has no value, there's no ownership on that. Something which is also about no, you can't do anything with it. You're probably going to think of something you could do with it. There still could do something.
That's
with
like something that has sentimental value but have no monetary value. Right?
it. I don't know. That I don't know.
I have one mitzvah to do with the garbage, to throw it out.
Oh, you're saying it's worth a lot of money. You get a mitzvah to help your wife. Yeah.
The Gemara says a case how we can invent a case where this Shanis was going to be worth something. That everything happened by a shomer. Means you had a shomer niskal. You had this ox which was supposed to be stoned by Bezdin, but didn't get it. He didn't get to it yet, and he gave it over to a shomer. He gave it over to a custodian to watch it. And in the shomer's house, it was mazik. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. That it didn't. He gave over a shor to a shomer, a regular shor, and it damaged it in the custody of the shomer, of the guardian, and nigmar dina b'beis shomer, and also Bezdin paskin on it that it's supposed to be killed, and then. Gun for gun of shomer, and then it was stolen, and this gun stole it from the shomer. Is it worth anything? It's worth something to the shomer. Why is that? Rav Meir Savalak Rav Yaakov Savalak Rav Shimon. Savalak Rav Yaakov Damar Afesh Nigma Dino Achziva Shomer Lavala Musa. Savalak Rav Shimon Damar Davar Gam Lamom Kmam Dami. That's the end of the parentheses over here. The Gemara made. I can give you a case where it's worth something to somebody. Why is the case? The shomer over here, he got an ox worth $1,000. He's supposed to return the ox worth $1,000, but he was negligent and it gored somebody. And it became chayiv misa. The shor has to be killed. So the $1,000 is down the drain. But the halacha would be that if you'd give it back to the owner, he would be discharged. Even though he took an ox which is worth $1,000 and he gave him back an ox which is worth nothing because it's supposed to be killed, he still will be patur. Whatever the reason for that is, it brings here Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov says that even if nigma dino achziva shomer labala musa, if he returned it, I took an ox from you, I gave you back an ox, even though before the ox was worth $1,000. Now the ox is worthless because it's supposed to be stoned. Still. I discharge my responsibility to give you back the ox that I got. That's not our subject, but that's the Gemara probably in Baba. Where is that going to be? In Baba Kama. Over there it talks about this law that if he would have given back the item that he borrowed, even though now it's worthless, he would have discharged his responsibility. But if he doesn't give back the ox, then he has to pay back $1,000. I gave you ox, where's my ox? So if it got stolen, it's not worth anything. Then he can't give back the ox anymore. And there's a opinion of Shimon that says, even though it's not doesn't have actual value, but it is worth value to me because I could get money for it. So here, to the shomer, it's worth something. To everybody else, it's worthless. This ox, you can't, if you shecht that it's not worth anything, you can't eat the meat. But it's worth to the shomer that he could use this in order to pay back his obligation to the owner. He borrowed, he took a ox as a picadon. He has to watch it, and if he doesn't give it back, he has to pay the value of the shore, even though it's not worth anything. To him, it's worth, because if he doesn't give it back, if he gives it back as is, even though it's worthless now, he discharges his responsibility. If he doesn't give it back, then he has to pay out of his pocket $1,000. That's called something which causes money. So these two problems, the Gemara is not in parentheses, so to speak. The Gemara problem about Tobeach, that it becomes Asabana right away, and that the Gemara answers that it's talking about that he didn't make it also, he didn't serve it as Avodah Zarah until the end of the Shechita, the second Siman. Second Kasha of the Shara is how's it worth any money? The Gemara invented a case, the Gemara found a case where it might be worth money. All this was, you have to scroll back. This is a big sugya the whole day today. What happened so far? The Gemara wanted to know on the bottom line of the previous page, why should the Rabbanan say that he's part of the case over here that Rav Meir said if he slaughtered or if he stole and slaughtered on Shabbos or Avodah Zarah, so it's chayiv, and the Chachamim say pater. We thought it's because of Kamle B'Drabim Minei, and we thought Rav Meir says Kamle B'Drabim Minei is chayiv. Chachamim say pater, and our kasha is we wanted to say that our Mishnah goes according to Rav Meir. If you saw Mishnah says Rav Meir, our Mishnah says there is a P'tor Kamle B'Drabim Minei. So we had to say the case was a case of no Kamle B'Drabim Minei. Somebody else shechted it. All this was Rabbi Yochanan. This was Rabbi Yochanan that said that the case of the Rabbanan that say that Gana B'Tavah B'Shabbos is pater is a case. I'm sorry, Rav Meir says Gana B'Tavah B'Shabbos is chayiv is only in the case of somebody else shechted it. And then the Gemara comes to the problem. So why did Chachamim say pater? And that the Gemara said because Shechita Sheni Ruri. That was what we learned today so far. And now on all that, the next Gemara is going to argue. Last line, Rabbi Omar. The case of the Brisa of Rav Meir that says that if somebody stole and slaughtered on Shabbos, Rav Meir says chayiv, he did it himself. Not like we said till now. The whole day today we said it's talking about somebody else did it. Or else it would have been Kamli B'Drabim Minei, he would have been pater. Here the Gemara is saying, no, Rabbi says you did it yourself. So the question is, so how could you be chayiv? It's Kamli B'Drabim Minei. Rav Meir lokum mishalem mislei, meisa mishalem leslei. Still, we're going to continue saying that he does hold the Kamli B'Drabim Minei, even though he holds that you could be chayiv two penalties of malchus and payment. But he also agrees that meisa mishalem you don't say that Kamli B'Drabim Minei. So back to the kash again. So how could you say that Rav Meir is our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says that if he would have had relations with a daughter or somebody that is chayiv capital punishment, so he would be pater. Rav Meir says that meis mishalem seems to be chayiv. Shaniyani the chidushu shechid shatorah b'knas afagav the mikdal mishalem. Comes a new chiddush that even if you hold Kamle B'Drabim Minei, what does Kamle B'Drabim Minei mean? That if somebody incurred a death penalty together with a monetary payment, so he's pater on the payment. He only has the capital punishment, and he doesn't have to pay. But not Gemara is saying that's only when it will be a payment. But if it's going to be a penalty, a knas, so a knas is chayiv. He has to pay the penalty even if there was incurred a capital punishment. So that's going to explain Rav Meir over there by the case of Gana B'Tavach. Over there, the fact that you pay dollar to pay is also considered a knas. What was the case here? That's to read again. This brisa that we're focusing on. Gana B'Tavach B'Shabbos or Avodah Zarah. Rav Meir says chayiv. How could the Rebbe say chayiv? Kamle B'Drabim Minei. The answer is that Kamle B'Drabim Minei does not apply to a penalty. It only applies to a payment. Like somebody, the case we had till now, that is Mechal Shabbos, when he burnt down somebody's barn or he tore somebody's garment on Shabbos in a way that it's a Chil Shabbos, and he's chayiv for damages. Chayiv for damages is not a penalty. Chayiv for damages is he has to pay. You damage somebody, you got to pay. But the din of knas that we're talking about now, the 50 shkolim, that's a knas. That means besides boshes, pagam, tsar, all these things, all those payments that a person has to pay to a woman is besides the damages. There's a knas. There's some that are considered damages, like the nezek, that the tsar, the boshes, all those things is considered payments, not penalties. But there's a penalty of the 50 pieces of silver. That's a penalty. So the chiddush the Rebbe holds is that a penalty is chayiv, even as Kamle B'Drabim Minei doesn't take away the penalty. That's what the Gemara wants to answer the Mishnais. Of course, there's a big kasha that's jumping at us, that if that's true, doesn't make sense. Vito doesn't make sense. That the case the Mishnah is going to say by us is that the Gemara wants, the whole purpose of the Gemara is to say that our Mishnais can be Rav Meir. Our Mishnais say that if someone has relations with a daughter, he does pay the knas. Which this is going to the Gemara is going to answer the kasha. If you say this teretz that Rav Meir holds that you chayiv the knas, even Kamle B'Drabim Minei, so he didn't answer the kasha. How come the Mishnah later on is going to say that Vito was pater because of Kamle B'Drabim Minei was somewhat a knas? That has to be explained. That's going to be tomorrow's daf. But here the Gemara just says this, takes this part, that the reason why Rameir says that Shabbos is chayiv is because Kamei B'Rabbi doesn't apply to a knas. That's the words Chiddush Shechut Torah B'Knas. The Torah says a Chiddush that by knas you pay even though he's going to get killed. Kamei B'Rabbi is only ptor on other monetary payments like damages, things like that, but it's not going to be a ptor for a knas. The Gemara is going to show that Rabba understands the pshat in Rameir is that even though he is going to get killed, not the case the way the Gemara said till now, somebody else did it, I didn't do it on Shabbos, somebody else did it, so I didn't get a death penalty. It's even if the same person got the death penalty, knas is different. That's the main answer of the Gemara. That Meir holds that knas is paid even if it's Kamei B'Rabbi Minei. And the Gemara is going to show that Rabba holds like that. We see Rabba says consistency, what that this is the pshat that he holds in Meir. Domer Rabba, how you could be gonna v'tavcha b'Shabbos. Chayiv shekvan is chayiv b'gnei v'kol mishavel l'deis Shabbos. But gonna v'tavach b'Shabbos, pater she'en gnei ve'en tvich ve'en mechira. All we see from this Rabba is going to be that he says that the case of Rameir is talking about that he himself did it on Shabbos. There's a Kamei B'Rabbi Minei. But we're going into a side point. What Rabba says about that, he says there's a difference. When did he steal it? It means the stealing also sometimes is going to be done in a way that it's a Chil Shabbos. Slaughtering is surely Chil Shabbos. Whenever you slaughter, it's a Chil Shabbos. To steal depends. Sometimes you can steal on Shabbos without transgressing Shabbos. Sometimes the way that he stole is because he took it into Rishus Harabim. The only way that he stole is also a Chil Shabbos. The Gemara is going about cases where the stealing also was considered a Chil Shabbos. So here it says like this: if he had a goat that was stolen before Shabbos already, he had from Erev Shabbos he stole, and he slaughtered it on Shabbos. Chayiv. He is chayiv. Now, right away you see that the case is that he was Mechal Shabbos, and still Rabbi holds that he's chayiv. That's what the Gemara wanted to bring. The main point is to show that even though it's Kamei B'Rabbi, they still have to pay a knas. That's what the Gemara really wants. But there's a side point over here. We get some more Chidushim that we didn't look for. We get some bonus over here. That's only if it was stolen before Shabbos and he slaughtered it on Shabbos. Then it's chayiv. Why? Shekhan is chayiv b'gneva because because the gneva party was chayiv before Shabbos. The gneva, the stealing he did before Shabbos is chayiv the principal because he stole. And then if he slaughtered on Shabbos, he's chayiv 4 times more because he stole, because he slaughtered it. And we don't care that it was on Shabbos. That's what the Gemara wants to say, that you see that even if he slaughtered on Shabbos and Kamei B'Rabbi doesn't discharge, doesn't pater a knas. But the point that the Gemara is saying, Agav, that the new point we're going to get is, but Ganav v'tavach b'Shabbos, if he stole it on Shabbos also, means that the Geneva also was done with a Chil Shabbos. Not that he just did Hagbo in the Rishus of the Nignav, then it wouldn't be in the Chil Shabbos. But the way that he stole it also was with a Chil Shabbos. Then he's going to say, yes, but why? That since he says he says a principle that whenever you pay 4 times includes the first time, includes the principal. You pay principal plus another 3 times, or the principal plus another 4 times. But if there's no principal, then you don't pay the other 3 times. It means whenever it says you have to pay 4 times as much, that includes the principal times 4. But if there's no principal, so you're not going to say, so just pay the 3 times knas. That you don't do. So here he says that the case of the Geneva, he is pater. Why is he pater on the Geneva? Because it was a Chil Shabbos and Kamei B'Rabbi Minei. So you see that the Kamei B'Rabbi Minei does pater the principle, it just doesn't pater the penalty. So this is the Gemara shows clearly that Rabbi says the Chiluk in Rav Meir is that the din of Kamei B'Rabbi Minei he does hold up. He doesn't hold up Kamei B'Rabbi Minei to pater penalty. So in the payment of 4, in payment of 4, there's 1 penalty. There's one payment and 3 penalties. 3 times the penalty. So here he says that if you don't have the principal, because Kamei B'Rabbi Minei took that off, then you don't pay the penalty either, because there's no such thing as paying 3 or 4. The halach is to pay 4 or 5. That by a sheep you pay 4 times as much. Tachas I said, if you're only going to pay 3 times because one of them is going to be discharged because Kamei B'Rabbi Minei, you don't pay anything. But anyway, what do you see? That he does hold the Kamei B'Rabbi Minei, but he doesn't know the Kamei B'Rabbi Minei on the penalty. The penalty you have to pay even if it was a Kamei B'Rabbi Minei. And the Gemara shows the case from the Reisha that if he stole it before Shabbos, so that party is going to pay his chayiv the Karen, and now he stored it on Shabbos, even though it was on Shabbos and Kamei B'Rabbi Minei. No, he doesn't have to pay because it's going to be 4 times, 1 from before Shabbos plus another 3 times that penalty, and there's no Kamei B'Rabbi Minei on the penalty. If he did the stealing also on Shabbos, and over there is going to be able to Kamei B'Rabbi Minei on the principle, so then he doesn't have to pay anything because there's no din of paying 3 times a sheep, it's the din to pay 4 times a sheep.
Why on Shabbos then, when he steals it, it's potter on the payback?
because there's a kamli b'drabim in it. The first time, the principle that he has to
They're
pay
not
back is not a penalty.
They're not necessarily simultaneous.
He stole it
He
before.
stole it on Shabbos.
Yeah, but he's part.
20 minutes
Yes,
later,
yes,
he
but he's part.
shifted.
Yes, but he's part. How much is he going to pay for the principle? He's part because kamli b'drabim in it. He stole it in a way that's Sechol Shabbos. He stole it by dragging it out into Rishus Rabbah. So does he have to pay for the Geneva? No, because kamli b'drabim in it. Then later on, 20 minutes when he shuts it, and he is gonna, he should stay over there. He should stay over there. There's no p'tor of kamli b'drabim in on the penalty, but he's not going to pay because he's not going to pay 3 times a sheep. You have to pay 4 times a sheep. And here that there's no p'tor, there's no chiyuv on the Karen, so there's no chiyuv of the Dalet Vei either. But what the Gemara sees on this whole thing is that on the principle there is a p'tor of kamli b'drabim minei. On the penalty there's no p'tor of kamli b'drabim minei. Once the Gemara got it, really that's enough that we have already. The rest of the page now is going to be also going further into the cruise. We're going off on a tangent again. Chayiv shekvan eschayiv gnei v'kol mishav l'deis amachteres kan v'tav b'machteres potter shemen gnei v'en tvich v'en mechira. The Gemara says a huge chiddush that I think we probably wouldn't have thought of. We still till now it changes the whole outlook on what does kamli b'drabim minei mean. Till now, how do we understand it? That someone's chayiv a death penalty, so he incurred upon himself a death penalty together with a monetary penalty. So then only the death penalty, not the monetary penalty. Here's an interesting thing: somebody who was robbing, he's a robber. And he's robbing in a way that you're allowed to kill him. Some robbers, the Torah says, we're suspect that they might come for blood also. That if someone's going to stop them in their way, an armed robber, whatever he comes, that he's suspect that if someone's going to get in his way, he's going to kill him. He's not just coming to steal money. He's coming for money, and if he needs to, he's going to kill also. So then the halach is, if you see him, you're allowed to kill him. That's a bob b'machteres. If somebody comes tunneling through, so then the pasuk says that he's suspect that he's coming to kill also, if he needs to, and therefore if somebody sees him, you're allowed to kill him. A regular guy who's only coming from money, you're not allowed to kill him. You stop him. He wants to take money. Stop him for taking money. Beat him up, whatever, but don't kill him. But if someone's coming in a way that he's suspect, he might kill, you're allowed to kill him. What if the Chiddush Gemara is going to say is that that's also considered a kind of a death penalty, since he's subject to death, not by Bezdin, by anybody who sees him, the policeman or the neighbor that has a gun, he's allowed to kill him. So that's also called that he's incurring upon himself a death penalty. So if at the time that he incurs this death penalty, he also steals some kind of money, so he's parted from the money because of kamei b'drabim minei. A whole new outlook. I think we wouldn't have said that. We wouldn't have said that that's called a death penalty. Here the Gemara says, if somebody stole and slaughtered.
It's more ain't like dumb. Ain't like dumb is the same thing as kamli b'drabim minei.
No, it's that his life is hefker. And the means that you're allowed to kill.
That's why he potter because not because kamli b'drabim.
Yes, kamei b'drabim minei.
Because ain't like
Kamei b'drabim. Why is he parted on the money?
Because it ain't like dumb.
What does ain't like
Not
dumb mean?
not like a person, no.
So he's not. His life is hefker. You're allowed to kill him. What does that have to do? He stole. He stole. He should have to pay for what he stole. This gun he stole. He stole. So he says he's put for the stealing because kamei b'drabim minei. Because he's put to death. Why is he put to death? Because someone's allowed to kill him. The fact that someone's allowed to kill him, that's like we're not talking about. That's not the subject. Subject is does he have a death hanging? Did he incur death? Not a penalty. Did he incur death upon himself? Not only a bezdin death. The fact that anyone's allowed to kill him, it's also called that he incurred upon himself a penalty.
He didn't get killed.
So by bezdin also, even if he didn't get killed, if someone's machal Shabbos in a way that bezdin would kill him, so he's chayiv misa, even if bezdin didn't kill him. He was a Chol Shabbos. He burned somebody's barn down on Shabbos. So he's part of the payment because he did a death penalty. He did a capital avera, capital crime, a crime which incurs upon himself a death penalty, even though Bezdin didn't kill him. So here too, he got himself a death penalty by the fact that he's stealing in a way, he's robbing in the tunnel over there in a way that his blood is hefker. You're allowed to kill him because he's suspect that he's going to kill. That's a fascinating idea. Here it says, if he had a sheep, a goat that was stolen already before he went into this tunnel, and then he slaughtered it while he's on the way to tunneling into somebody's house. Chayiv, even though there's a kamli b'drabim minei, shekvan is chayiv b'gnei v'kodem shavu l'idei yisum machteres. The gnei is chayiv for because he did it not in the machteres, so he's chayiv already for the gnei. That's the principle. And then even though there's a kamli b'drabim minei in the tunnel, he's still chayiv because there's no p'tor of kamli b'drabim minei on a penalty. The same is out again. But if he had stolen ganav v'tabach b'machteres, if he did both of them in the machteres, then he's potter because even though there's no kamli b'drabin on the penalty, but there is a kamli b'drabin on the principle. And if there's no principle to be paid because of whatever reason it is, here the reason is going to be because kamli b'drabin, so there's no penalty to be paid. So he said two cases of the same yisod. He did tell us a big chiddush that Rabbi Machteres is called that kamli b'drabin. I wouldn't have known that, but the Gemara doesn't consider that a chiddush, or maybe that's what the Gemara is going to say. That is a chiddush. That's what the Gemara is going to talk about. Why is that a chiddush? And why did he say both cases? One case was about Shabbos, one case is about Rabbi Machteres. Both of them are considered that he has a death penalty. But Tzvicha Yesh Min and Shabbos Mishum the Yisur Isser Olam. About Machteres, this is show who Emolo. You might think that the case of Machteres is not considered incurring upon himself a death penalty because
my problem with it is that he's the one who was
right. I would have thought
Misa,
right.
not that he is going to be killed. He could get killed, but
he's not Chayv Misa. Bezin doesn't kill somebody who's above a Machteres. Bezin doesn't take him to be killed. He's not a death penalty like Chil Shabbos. Chil Shabbos is if he Mechal Shabbos, Bezin takes him and kills him.
Exactly.
But here there's no such thing. Above a Machteres, Bezin doesn't kill him, but somebody, the neighbor is allowed to kill him. Someone who sees him tunneling into somebody's house or the person himself.
He's causing his own death. Not that he killed somebody.
Right. He's causing his own death. That's what I would have thought, like you, that's he's doing it to himself. He's doing it to himself. But someone's Mechal Shabbos also doing someone's Mechal Shabbos also doing it to himself. Who told you to be Mechal Shabbos to incur?
Right.
But the Gemara looks at it the same. The Gemara doesn't see a difference between somebody who incurred himself a death penalty because of a capital crime, or somebody put himself into the tunnel and he's suspect now to kill, and everyone's allowed to kill him now. It's all called he's incurring upon himself a death sentence kind of thing. So here, that the Gemara doesn't see as a chiddush, but the Gemara says there is a chiddush because by Shabbos Isur Olam, as Rashi explains, that once he did his Mechal Shabbos, Bezdin will kill him even 10 days later, even a month later, even a year later. He incurred upon himself a permanent death penalty. But the person who's going in the Machteres is only a death sentence as long as he's Baba Machteres. Once he got out of the tunnel, once he went away, you're not allowed to kill him anymore just because he was in the Machteres. By Chol Shabbos, once he was Mechal Shabbos, so then he's Chayiv death. But the person who is tunneling into somebody's house to steal and he might kill, so you're allowed to kill him as long as he's in the Machteres. That might not be called the same level of Kamli B'Drabi Minei. Via Shmi'inan Machteres, Mishum the Machtarto Zui Asrosa. Avol Shabbos, the Boy Asro, Imolo. You might think that a Machteres is more reason to be considered Kamli B'Drabi Minei because there's no Asra necessary. But by Shabbos, that he needs warning in order to be Chayiv Misa, you might think that it's not the same kind of a death penalty. It's only considered a death penalty if he gets warned. So Kamash Malak, both of these are considered Kamli B'Drabi Minei. Both of them is enough reason to be considered that he incurred upon himself a death sentence. The Gemara is going now further on the cruise. We're going further into a side issue. The reason why I brought this all is to show that Rav Meir holds that Kamli B'Drabi Minei. He does hold the Kamli B'Drabi Minei. He holds it as P'tur, but maybe by penalty he doesn't. That's what the Gemara's main chiddush was. But once we got here, the Gemara is enjoying the subject and going further a little bit more details about it. Amra Papa, or related topics as they say. Same case as till now that he has had a cow. Before it said a gdi, here it says a cow. The Gemara is going to use some sarcasm about this point. It says here that he had a cow that was already stolen before Shabbos, and he slaughtered it on Shabbos. He's chayiv. Same thing as before. Same case. Just before it was a goat, and here it's a cow. What was the case? That he had something stolen before Shabbos, so he's chayiv for the gneva, the principle. And then Tavcha b'Shabbos, even though he did it on Shabbos and Yav Kamli B'Drabi Minei, but once again, Rav Meir holds there's no P'tur of Kamli B'Drabi Minei on a penalty, and therefore he's chayiv. Because it came two different times. It wasn't a P'tur on the gneva. But now he doesn't end off the other thing. Before we would have said, but if he did the Gneva also on Shabbos, then he is part there because the main Gneva and Tvicha and Mechira. But here it says a little different. If somebody had borrowed a cow, not that he stole the cow, he borrowed a cow and he slaughtered it on Shabbos, then he is part there. Why is that? Because when he had a borrowed cow and he slaughtered it, so he did everything in one shot. That was the way that he stole it. He stole it and he slaughtered it. The slaughtering itself is the way that he stole it. He had borrowed it, so that's not a problem. And then he slaughtered the cow that he had borrowed. That's a way of stealing. And also he did, and also he slaughtered it. He stole and slaughtered it simultaneously. So he's going to be chayiv dalet v'hei. And but the point is that it was on Shabbos. Since it was on Shabbos, so there's a kamli b'drabi minei, and even on the principle there's in the kamli b'drabi minei. That's why he's potter. In the case where it was stolen before, so then he's chayiv the principle from before Shabbos, and then on Shabbos he could incur again the penalty of the 4 or 5 times, even though it was on Shabbos and Kamli B'Drabi Minei. There's no Kamli B'Drabi Minei on Shabbos. So he seemed to say the same yisod, just in case, instead of an example of Gedi of a goat, he uses the example of an ox. The Gemara says, what's the chiddush about that? He's coming to tell us a cow instead of a goat. Very sarcastic. That what he tells us, he said, tell us the same Allah over again, just a different example of a goat and then a cow.
Same
Same issue. He didn't say anything is different in the example. So he told him, no, you're only reading the ratio. You're right. The ratio, he's
4. No.
yeah, but there's no 4 and 5. But there's no difference between that. That's no difference if it will be a and that's the Gemara's kasha. There's no difference in the example. But the Gemara says you're right. As far as the first halacha of Rav Papa, there's no difference. Just here before it's talking about a gedi as the Marapara. But don't forget that the sefer, all the thing about borrowing, that's a big chiddush. Amalei Papa Shula /Minan. He's coming to tell you the halacha about Shula. Here's the case where he stole and slaughtered simultaneously, all on Shabbos. Before he said a case that he got a tabach gedi, but here the case was that he borrowed it and then he slaughtered it on Shabbos, and that's considered that he stole it and slaughtered it simultaneously. When a person borrows something, when does he become obligated as a shoel? So it says when someone borrows something, when he takes it, the shoel, the borrower, he pulls it into his rishus, he takes it, so then he's chayiv to support the animal, he's chayiv to feed the animal. And you'd say also from the time that he borrowed it, he's chayiv in owns. Means when does the shoel become chayiv to pay back the cow if he steals it? Means this shoel, this borrower, that he slaughtered the animal. He borrowed an animal and he slaughtered it. So when is he chayiv for it? Is it called the geneva now? Now that he slaughtered, now he's a ganer? Or he's chayiv already from the time that he borrowed it. Once you borrowed it, you're chayiv to give it back. And you didn't give it back. So you're chayiv because you borrowed it, you didn't give it back. So the Gemara is talking about this point. When is the geneva? Is the geneva from the time that he borrowed it to the time that he slaughtered it? You might think that it's not considered now that on Shabbos he slaughtered it, now he stole it. He's chayiv already for the principle from the time that he borrowed it. Kamash Malan, that we look at it that he slaughtered it on Shabbos, now he stole it, and therefore there's a kamle b'dirabah minei on the stealing. Amar Rava. And the Gemara is going still related topics, which it wasn't to bring in.
If you didn't slaughter, you can give it back.
Yeah, but he's chayiv to give it back. And if he didn't give it back, the reason why he's chayiv is because he borrowed it without giving it back. The Gemara is looking at once you take it from the time that you borrow it, that's when you're chayiv to pay back. Now, if you steal it, he just didn't give it back. And the reason why you're chayiv is because you borrowed it and you didn't give it back. Or the Prophet says no, that when you borrowed it, you're not chayiv. Yeah, you're chayiv to give it back, of course. But when you stole it, that's when you're taking it away from the owner. And therefore, if it happened.
Yeah, but he's you are to give it back. It's a normal thing to give it back. Only thing is, once he decided he's going to slaughter it, I think maybe even
you're saying the decision.
Even
but
the
here the
decision
Gemara,
we spoke about this.
But here the Gemara says not. Here the Gemara says that it's a slaughtering that makes him the ganav, and that's why it's going to become maybe drabimine. He's putter from the geneva because he came together with the kamle b'drabine. The Gemara seems to say that the slaughtering is when he stole it. And since he was pater then, because then he's pater on the whole thing. The Gemara seems to bring in another subject because we're going to see there's going to be a relationship to what we just said. Another interesting thing. Somebody borrowed a cow and he died. Are the inheritors allowed to continue using it? He borrowed a cow for 30 days. And after 2 days, he died. Are his inheritors allowed to continue using the borrowed object? What would you think? I don't know what I would have thought. Are the inheritors allowed to continue using the cow that their father had borrowed?
Yeah,
So
but
he's-
we're talking about Pasha, it's not the Bnei Bayis, because Bnei Bayis is always allowed.
Okay,
Sure, no?
maybe that's over. Maybe the borrowing is over. Give it back. The borrower died.
Until they
No,
find
it says that. A lot of continue. Here it says, if
Not over.
that's the chiddush, that even though he died, since he got a borrowed cow for 30 days, even though he died after 2
What can
days,
you do with it?
they're allowed to use it.
What can you do with it?
Take it a car.
What do you do with a cow? You're fresh. Well, you're a city boy. We're city boys.
The cow died.
No, the father, the borrower died. I didn't explain.
Could we make
And
it
you
now
find the
available
vehicle.
today? There would be the car.
truck,
Let's
a truck,
own the
yeah.
car.
The borrower is a cow. What is a cow? A threshing machine. That it, milk, whatever you want to do with
You
it.
can't carry it.
So he says they may. If the father left over, bequeathed to them not even bequeathed, that's long term, but he left over to his inheritors a borrowed cow. So they're allowed to continue using it the amount of time that the father was allowed to borrow it, even though he died. I think the lender comes and says, give back. He said, no, we have another 28 days to go. We're allowed to, just like our father borrowed, we're allowed to continue using it. But it says Mesa and Chavim Be'onsa. Now out of it died. So the halach is usually that the borrower is chayiv in onsin. I'm sorry. That if somebody shovel is chayiv in onsin, if onus happens, he has to pay. He's chayiv in everything. I was only part of Mesa Machmas Malacha, but it's chayiv in onsin. Here it says that they get the best of both worlds. That they're allowed to use it, but they're not considered a shovel that they'd have to be paid for the onus. Why is that? Because they didn't accept upon themselves. I don't understand this part here. They continue using it because the father was allowed to use it, but they don't have to pay onsim. They don't have to pay if an onus happens because they didn't accept upon themselves the she'ela. So they're not chayiv to pay if onus happens. Then it continues, kesuvos and shalavim, who they thought that was the father's. They didn't realize that it's a borrowed cow. That was the father's cow. So they slaughtered it. The father died, and now they have a cow that they thought that they inherited. Really, it's not the father's. And they slaughtered it, and they ate it. So they have to pay the other behay. They have to pay for slaughtering it and everything. So not they still. They have to pay anything. They don't even have to pay the principal. They just have to pay the amount that they benefited, which means the bazal is the way the Gemara says. Whenever you're not high for the actual product, you're just high for how much you benefited. So the Gemara usually considers this. Is it? Rashi says it. How much is it? Bazal. Rashi says that's 2/3. 2/3 of how much the price was, because they could have gotten it cheaper. Let's say they got a free lunch. They ate meat. So how much they could have gotten a cheaper product? They would have been satisfied. How much they got a good quality lunch. They could have gotten a mediocre. That's good enough. So you only have to pay how much you benefited. It's not considered that they stole, only how much they benefited. The price continues. These are the words we're going to concentrate on. That if the father left real estate, that means that the karka that he could pay up his chiyuvim from, so then they do have to pay. So again, what did it say? The Bryce had a couple of cases over here. First it said, not a Bryce, a Rava said, that if the father left over a borrowed cow, they're allowed to continue using it as long as the father would be allowed to use it. If it died, they're putter from onsin. If they thought that it was the father's and they slaughtered it and ate it, they only pay the benefit that they got out of it and not for the actual price of how much it costs. If the father left over, but they put a but, there's two cases, right? The case is first that they're not chayim onsin, and then it says that they don't have to pay for the meat either, only how much. Should be the masala sefer. Some say that the last halacha the Rava says if the father left over nechasim that they have to pay. Some say Rava meant on the first case that he said that's a chayv onsim, and some say that's going in the sefer. The masala reish calls going in the sefer. It's surely going in the sefer. It means if the father left over nechasim, they surely would have to pay for the cow that they ate up. But the question is, does it go to the ratio also? That's the end of the Gemara for today. What does it mean? That Rapapa talked about that the chiyuv is of the she'ela is from the time that he stole it. Just if Rashi over here.
How come became stolen? We're talking about the borrowed something.
The Rapapa said a chiddush before that even when somebody borrows something, you don't say that it's chayiv from the time that he borrowed it. He's chayiv from the time that the onus happened. The case we said, the case of what was the case we said before? That he slaughtered it. He borrowed a cow and he slaughtered it. Do you say that he's chayiv from the time that he borrowed it, or only when he slaughtered it, that's when he stole it? So Papa said the time that he slaughtered it, that's the time that he stole it. He's not chayiv from the time that he borrowed it, and therefore if he did it on Shabbos, so he's come maybe Rabbi Minei. That point the Gemara says might be in machlokes. Rabbi might be arguing on that. Papa said that the onus, that he's chayiv for the onus, he's chayiv for that from the time that the onus happened, the onus or the geneva, but he's not chayiv from the time that he borrowed it. Here the Gemara wants to know this question over here. The Gemara says the Rabbi might be arguing here. If he says the ratio, what's the ratio case? That the children, they used the cow of the father.
Borrowed cow.
They had a borrowed cow of the father, and they're using it, and it died. It died, and they have the chasam. They have the chasam of the father. Is the father's estate? Is it obligated to pay for the cow that he borrowed and died? So if you say that the chiyuv of the father is from the time that he borrowed it, so then his estate is chayiv because he borrowed a cow, and the estate becomes obligated to pay his debt. and there is an estate over there, so you have to pay. That would mean that it happened from that the obligation to pay for the onus that's going to happen is from the time that it borrowed, when the father was still alive. If so, Rava would be arguing on a papa, because our papa says the obligation is only when he steals it, only not at the time of the she'ela. And if you say some say that when Rava says if there's an estate left over that he does have to pay, that's only going on the safer case, but it's not going on the Reisha case. The Reisha case where the cow that the father borrowed died, and they might not have to pay. Why? Because he owes like a papa. According to our papa, the time that he borrowed it, he doesn't have to pay. The father, when he borrowed it, everything's fine. He only incurs the chiv to pay back only when it dies. When it dies, he's not alive anymore. So that ends off with the possibility that we might argue on our papa. All these came. That's as far as we go today. All these sugyas came tangent on a tangent, going further and further. Just to zoom out a second, that we're holding in kesuvos, first of all. We're holding in the kesuvos. But we're off that a long time already. The Mishnah spoke about a case where somebody was owning honest and to a woman who's chayv krisis, and the question was that how could he say it's chayv knas? It says later on that it says in Seches Malkus somebody's chayv malkus for that. So how could you be chayv malkus and woman? The Gemara on that three towards him already. One was that a case is where you chayiv malkus is only when there's no knas. The other test was only chayiv knas when there's no malkus. And now Rosh Lakish said today or yesterday, he said that the whole goes according to a mayor that holds local mishalim. He holds it's possible to be voted them. Both are true. He gets a knas, yes, chayiv malkus, local mishalim. The Gemara went off to a subject about kamli b'drabim because our Mishnah is hold that you do say kamli b'drabim. Does a mayor hold like that? And the Gemara brought down Brisa that seems to say that mayor does not hold a kamli b'drabim because it says a gun of a tava b'shabbos is chayiv. How can he be chayiv kamli b'drabim? And then we had two terutzim. One was to say that over there it's talking about somebody else did it. Both of us are going to say also kamli b'drabim, and that the mission is going to be good. The Amish does hold kamli b'drabim, so does Rav Meir. But over there, how are you going to explain to Rav Meir that says the case of the stealing and slaughtering that he's on Shabbos or the Zorah says over there that he's chayiv? How could he be chayiv kamli b'drabim? One teretz was that somebody else did it, and he didn't incur on himself the capital punishment. Somebody else did. On that, the Gemara had a problem. How you can explain the Rabbanan? The Gemara said Shkita Shein Ruya. The Gemara went into that as a side point topic. And the second text explained of Meir is that he holds a kamli b'drabim, but not on a penalty. That even so, kamli b'drabim is only on a moment, on a monetary payment, but not on a penalty. And that's why onus is going to pay, even though it's kamli b'drabim, and we still have to wait for the kasha tomorrow. Then, if so, the case of Mishnah also has a penalty. How come he's chayav to pay the onus if there's a kamli b'drabim? So that we have to hold on for tomorrow still. Yasher koach, everybody. Thank you. Yasher koach. Thank you. Dr. Fine, when are you leaving?
Tomorrow